Imagine you are a parent. Your child was diagnosed with autism at age 2. The pediatrician handed you a pamphlet. Early intervention, behavioral therapy, patience. No pill, no cure. An 8-month waiting list for speech therapy. A school unsure it had the right resources. You went home and did what every parent in your position does. You went on the internet. And there, in forums and online groups and video comment sections, you found something the pediatrician had not offered. Hope. Not cautious, qualified hope. Vivid, testimonial hope. Parents who said their child spoke first words 3 days after starting a new protocol. A doctor on a podcast describing a biological rationale that made intuitive sense. An online group with 25,000 members, all there for the same reason you are. That is the world in which Leucovorin, a drug usually reserved for cancer chemotherapy, became the latest answer to a question asked desperately for the better part of a century. What if there is something we can give them? In late 2025, FDA Commissioner Marty Makary declared the agency would change the drug's label for children with autism. Hundreds of thousands of kids, he said, will benefit. The largest clinical trial of Leucovorin for autism was retracted in early 2026 for data errors. The FDA still had not updated the label. Welcome to History Repeating. Today we are doing what this channel was built to do. Place a current moment inside the longer story that produced it. The Leucovorin story is not about one drug. It is about a recurring pattern in which parents' desperation, institutional ambition, and genuine scientific uncertainty combine to produce something that looks like a breakthrough and often turns out to be something else. We have been here before. Each time, the mechanism is identical. A preliminary study, parents hungry for answers, media amplification that outpaces evidence, political or commercial incentives pushing adoption before the science is ready, and then the reckoning. We will trace that pattern, starting with what Leucovorin is and what the evidence says, then going back to Secretin in the 1990s, the vaccine panic of the early 2000s, and further still. History is not just what happened. It is the context in which we decide what to do next. Part 1. What Leucovorin is and what the evidence actually says. Leucovorin, also known as folinic acid, is a folate derivative, a form of vitamin B9, used safely for decades to protect healthy cells from the toxic effects of methotrexate during chemotherapy. Its safety profile is well established. That is not in dispute. The rationale for its use in autism begins with a genuine condition, cerebral folate deficiency, where the bloodstream has normal folate levels, but the brain does not receive enough. This can result from rare genetic mutations or autoantibodies that block folate transport into the cerebrospinal fluid. Children with this confirmed condition can experience seizures, developmental delays, and autism-like symptoms. When Leucovorin is given early, there is reasonable evidence it helps. That is the solid ground. Everything beyond it is more uncertain. The broader claim is that up to 76% of autistic children have folate receptor autoantibodies, and that treating them with Leucovorin could improve autism symptoms widely. A claim resting on a much smaller and more contested evidence base. The most significant clinical trial, a 2024 study claiming 24 weeks of treatment reduced symptom severity versus placebo, was retracted in early 2026 after data tables failed to add up and results could not be replicated. 4 other published studies, each showing modest communication improvements, have been criticized for small sample sizes, inconsistent dosing, and inadequate blinding. The most cited involved 48 children. not a foundation for a public health intervention affecting hundreds of thousands. Leading autism researchers were direct. We have nothing resembling even moderate evidence that leucovorin is an effective treatment for autism symptoms, said David Mandel, a leading autism researcher. The Autism Science Foundation called it jumping the gun. Over 250 autism scientists said the press conference alarms us researchers who committed our entire careers to better understanding autism. None of this means leucovorin is worthless. It may have genuine value for children with confirmed cerebral folate deficiency, and rigorous trials may show broader benefits. But the FDA's action came not from trial evidence, but from a literature review of 23 case studies. And the drug's original manufacturer explicitly disclaimed any scientific conviction in the label update. Science cannot skip the testing process because the political moment demands an answer. This is where things stand in early 2026. Now let us go back, because this situation has stood before. Part 2. Secretin and the Anatomy of a Miracle. To understand why the leucovorin story follows such a familiar arc, consider Secretin in the late 1990s, the first name on a long list of, in Dr. Paul Offit's words, magic medicines to treat autism that haven't worked. Its story is almost identical to what we are watching today. Secretin is a digestive hormone used medically to test pancreatic function. In 1998, a gastroenterology journal paper described three children, who received Secretin injections and, according to their parents, showed marked improvements in language and social behavior. The biological rationale seemed plausible. Secretin receptors exist in the brain. 3 children. 1 paper. Within months, Secretin had become the most talked about autism treatment in America. Parents began demanding it from pediatricians. Private clinics offered it at significant cost. One British family spent £5,000 at a private London clinic. Waiting lists formed. A small industry emerged to meet demand that outran any credible evidence. By the late 1990s, Secretin had become a cultural phenomenon. The treatment the establishment was allegedly too cautious to acknowledge. Then, the trials happened. In 1999, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study found no significant difference between Secretin and saline. More trials reached the same conclusion. By 2003, the consensus was firm. Secretin did not alleviate autism symptoms. The excitement evaporated. Families who had spent thousands were left with nothing but the memory of the hope they had felt. Notice the structure. A plausible biological mechanism, a small initial observation, media amplification faster than scientific review, commercial incentives meeting desperate demand, popular belief outpacing evidence, and then failure. The differences between Secretin in 1998 and Leucovorin in 2025 are real. Leucovorin has a confirmed mechanism for a specific subgroup, and the folate deficiency biology is genuine. But the gap between that subgroup and the broader autism population is substantial, and the political pressure to move faster than the science is identical. When an FDA commissioner declares at a White House press conference that hundreds of thousands of children will benefit from a treatment that has not cleared the evidentiary bar, we are in Secretin territory. The clothes are different. The architecture is the same. Part 3. The long history of curing what was misunderstood. To understand why autism has been such fertile ground for unproven treatments, you have to understand how it was understood, and profoundly misunderstood, for most of the 20th century. This is not just a story about desperate parents and unscrupulous providers. It is about what happens when a condition is defined by the wrong framework for decades. Leo Kanner first described autism as a distinct condition in 1943. His case reports were careful, but a damaging theory was attached. Kanner noted the parents he observed seemed unusually cold, a reflection of his patient population, drawn from educated families with clinic access. From this, he developed the suggestion that autism might relate to inadequate maternal affection. That suggestion became a full theory in Bruno Bettelheim's 1967 book, The Empty Fortress, one of the most destructive texts in developmental psychology. Bettelheim argued autism was caused by mothers so cold their children retreated into a psychological fortress. He called them refrigerator mothers, claimed a fabricated cure rate, and was comprehensively discredited. Yet for nearly 20 years, his framework dominated professional treatment of autism. In practice, mothers of autistic children were told by credentialed professionals that they had caused their child's condition through emotional failure. Some children were placed in Bettelheim's residential school, where survivors have described an environment of fear and abuse dressed as therapy. None of it helped, because the theory was wrong. The parents who pushed back, who formed a national advocacy organization in 1965 and demanded professionals stop blaming them, were not overreacting. They had been systematically gaslit for 2 decades. That hard-earned skepticism created a community more willing than most to explore treatments outside the mainstream, sometimes usefully, sometimes painfully. When you understand that history, the Leucovorin moment looks different. Parents sharing testimonials online are not simply credulous. They operate in a tradition of self-advocacy born from medicine's failure. Their skepticism of institutions is justified. The problem is that such skepticism can be exploited just as easily as trust, and the autism treatment landscape has long been full of people willing to do exactly that. Part 4. The Vaccine. Chapter and the Cost of Getting It Wrong. One episode demands direct attention: the claim that childhood vaccines cause autism. This is not a claim with 2 legitimate sides. It has been tested more extensively than almost any medical question in modern history, and it has failed every test. In 1998, Andrew Wakefield published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal claiming a connection between the measles, mumps, rubella (MMR) vaccine and a syndrome combining autism and gastrointestinal disorder. The paper involved 12 children and relied on falsified data. Wakefield held undisclosed patents on competing vaccines and had been paid by lawyers preparing vaccine litigation. He lost his medical license. The journal retracted the paper in 2010. The paper's influence outlasted its retraction by decades. Dozens of large-scale studies across multiple countries have found no link between vaccines and autism. A 2019 Danish study of over 650,000 children and a 2020 meta-analysis covering over 1.2 million both reached the same conclusion. The scientific consensus is as settled as it gets. The cost of the panic has been real. Measles, eliminated in the United States by 2000, returned. Whooping cough hit communities where vaccination rates had fallen. People died from preventable diseases because a fraudulent paper planted a fear that evidence alone has not extinguished. The same press conference also included renewed suggestions that vaccines cause autism and claims that acetaminophen during pregnancy is a cause. The World Health Organization urged caution, noting multiple studies found no such link. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists stated clearly that acetaminophen is safe for pregnant women, and that untreated high fever carries real risks. We are not watching a new chapter, but a remix. the details have changed. Acetaminophen instead of vaccines, Leucovorin instead of Secretin. But the underlying pattern is the same one that produced the refrigerator mother theory, the Secretin mania, and the vaccine crisis. Part 5. What science actually knows about autism. Let me turn to what science actually knows about autism, because the pattern of false hope has sometimes obscured genuine progress. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by differences in social communication and restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior. The word spectrum matters. It spans from people who are largely non-speaking and require substantial support to those who are fully independent and experience their neurodivergence as a difference rather than a disability. Collapsing this range into a single thing to be fixed obscures more than it reveals. The scientific consensus is that autism is primarily genetic. Twin studies find concordance rates between 60 and 90%, and dozens of genes have been associated with autism risk. The strongest identified environmental predictor is paternal age. Older men accumulate more spontaneous mutations in sperm cells, some affecting neurodevelopmental pathways. The rise in diagnoses, described as a tragic fourfold increase, is real in the sense that the numbers are real. But researchers consistently find most of it is explained by broadened diagnostic criteria, increased awareness, better screening, and reduced stigma. Evidence for a true prevalence increase driven by an environmental agent is considerably weaker than the political language implies. What actually helps? The clearest evidence supports early behavioral and communication interventions, therapies building language, social skills, and adaptive functioning from early childhood. Applied behavior analysis in its modern, ethical form has a substantial evidence base. Speech and occupational therapy have documented benefits. Certain medications help with co-occurring anxiety, ADHD, and epilepsy. These are not glamorous answers, but they work. Part 6. The politics of hope and the economics of desperation. Why does this pattern keep repeating? Why do miracle cures emerge, catch fire, and burn out with such regularity? Secretin, B12 injections, hyperbaric oxygen, chelation therapy, the gluten-free, casein-free diet, and now Leucovorin? Part of the answer is the nature of autism. Because the condition presents so differently across individuals and autistic children develop over time, any intervention will be followed by some changes. Parents watching and hoping intensely will attribute changes to the treatment. Not out of dishonesty, but from the human tendency to weight confirming evidence more than disconfirming evidence. Part of the answer is economic. The autism treatment market is enormous, and the absence of a definitive pharmaceutical solution has created a lucrative space for products outside the evidence-based mainstream. Parents told that patience is the primary treatment are not difficult marks. They are human beings in desperate circumstances, and the market has always known how to find them. And part of the answer is political. Autism affects a large, mobilized constituency, and politicians who announce the government is finally acting generate intense gratitude from a community that has often felt ignored. Announcing Leucovorin offered the opportunity to claim a historic first. The first FDA-recognized autism treatment. That the recognition was for a rare condition sharing some features with autism, and that the evidence for broader benefit was dramatically overstated, was a detail that did not fit the narrative. This has historical precedent. In the 1950s and 60s, state institutions for people with developmental disabilities were defended as models of modern care despite documented neglect and abuse. The advocacy groups that won deinstitutionalization did so against fierce resistance. Autism policy has long been a history of families fighting systems that preferred easy answers to honest ones. Closing. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. Leucovorin may not be the next Secretin. Children with confirmed cerebral folate deficiency may genuinely benefit from wider recognition of their condition, and large, rigorous trials may show real benefits more broadly. History does not require every story end the same way. But Leucovorin arrived through political announcement rather than scientific approval. A press conference promising hundreds of thousands of beneficiaries, a retracted study, and the alarm of 250 autism researchers. That is the same path Secretin walked in 1998, and history tells us what that path tends to produce. The families following those social media posts deserve honest information, not managed hope, a healthcare system that funds rigorous trials, access to therapies with real evidence, and treatment as partners in science, rather than an audience for announcements. They also deserve acknowledgement that "we do not yet know" is sometimes the most honest answer, and more useful than a confident wrong one. The parents who spent their savings on Secretin in 1999 learned that the hard way. Those told for 20 years that their coldness caused their children's condition learned it harder still. The history of autism treatment is a history of what happens when institutions pursue easy narratives. The refrigerator mother theory persisted because it was coherent, lucrative, and politically inert. It blamed mothers with no power to push back. Secretin persisted because hope is a powerful market force. The vaccine panic persists because a terrified community found in it an explanation that felt like agency. Leucovorin may help some children. We need trials to find out which ones, at what doses. This moment does not deserve a political shortcut that gives families false certainty before science delivers real answers. The autistic community has been saying something important. Many autistic adults do not experience their neurology as a tragedy requiring a cure, but as a different way of being in the world requiring accommodation and respect. The Leucovorin debate is happening almost entirely among parents and policymakers, and that imbalance is itself historical. Autism policy has long been made by people without autism, about people with autism, often with good intentions and damaging results. Nothing about autism is simple, but the pattern we have examined today, the magic cure pattern, the announcement before evidence pattern, is simple. It is old, and it has a track record. This is history repeating. If this video raised questions you want to pursue, Paul Offit's Autism's False Prophets chronicles the vaccine panic in rigorous detail, and Steve Silberman's Neurotribes traces the history from Kanner and Bettelheim through the modern neurodiversity movement. For current reporting, several science journalism outlets have been clear-eyed in ways that the press conference coverage was not. If you found this useful, please share it, not for the algorithm, but because the families navigating this deserve context. Leave a comment and tell me what history you want us to examine next. The past is not finished. It is working, and so are we.